Hope you can see me, hope you can hear me. If you can, do let us know. That's always a good start, isn't it? Here we are for the next in the Admiral's Hot Topic webinars here about what, if any, future there is for the euro currency. So an interesting topic. But first and foremost, okay, if you're here in the session in live with Zoom, fantastic, great to have you here. If you have thoughts or questions about the euro, stack them in there. If you're watching this on our YouTube live stream, welcome on board wherever you are in the world. I appreciate we always have a broad range of experience from people all over the world joining us for our sessions. If you've enjoyed these Admirals webinars, then please by all means give us a thumbs up there beneath us. Make sure to subscribe beneath there, okay, to the Admirals YouTube channel, and you'll be sure to keep abreast of all the latest content that we're creating here with my colleagues Marcus and Jens. But as I say, we're here today to talk about what's the future for the euro. I appreciate you might have thoughts on that. You might have good thoughts, you might have bad thoughts. It doesn't matter. That's all here that makes for an interesting afternoon's debate, doesn't it? So what we'll do without further ado is that we'll switch across to the charts, and we'll switch across to the slides to begin with, and then we'll move on to the charts at the end of our session. So if you just bear with us, what we'll do is we'll bring that up and we'll look to begin. Thanks, Vincenzo. Great to see you here as always. Good afternoon. That's super. Thank you. Thanks, Seth. So, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. Here's a bit of an interesting, some might say controversial topic for us to talk about today of all days. Does the euro have a future? All right, what to make of the single currency? So as I said, it'd be fascinating to hear what your own thoughts on this. Maybe you think it's the future, and it'll be here forevermore. Maybe you think it's struggled, and those struggles will continue, and perhaps it may end up fracturing. I don't think there's any right or wrong at this particular time or place. It's actually just more about interesting to hear what your particular thoughts are on that. So if you are, if you're, as I said, if you're in Zoom, just put them in the chat box what you think. And also what we'll do is, if you're watching this on YouTube, if you've got comments, just thoughts, just put them in there, and we'll have a little chat about that. As I said, I appreciate we always have a broad range of experience in the room, and I appreciate there will be people here joining us today who are, very new to trading, really that, and we're trying to give them a little bit of insight into the kind of currencies that can be traded and what goes on with those currencies. I also appreciate that not everyone is as old and wizened and mature as me to remember what life was like before the euro was around. Okay, and going back into the days of having to use Deutschmarks and lira and pesetas and francs, etc. So I appreciate some people will their only experience will have been using the euro, so they won't really understood where it's come from, how the impact it has, and what might be the problems with it, and what might the future be for it. So there's plenty for us to talk about, and what we'll do is we'll switch across to the charts, the euro chart at the end. So be sure to stay with us so we can you can have a look at what we see in the charts at the end. As always, just to quickly remind you that Admiral Markets is now Admirals as part of their 20th anniversary. They've gone through a rebranding exercise. Doesn't really have any impact on you in the way you trade, just for you to be aware of the new branding profile. And Admirals themselves, as I say, are a Forex and CFD broker, with a wide range of instruments to be able to trade it, providing global presence with local support. They're licensed and regulated across a wide range of regulatory environments, providing competitive spreads on the most popular trading products. And you have the opportunity to engage with markets using both MT4, MT5, and the Admiral's own Supreme Edition. So if you've got any questions about that or would like further information, please get in touch with your account representative, and they'll be very happy to help guide you. And for those of you who, just can't get enough of Admirals, all right, you just can't get enough of myself, and more in particular Marcus and Jens, okay, is that you can follow us even more now, all right. If you're on Instagram, you can follow us at Admirals Global, so be sure to sort of go on to Admirals, give us a follow there, okay, and just look at the content that the Admirals team are putting out there, and they give you an idea of, all the amazing tools and resources that are available to you, and also, indications of when, the next time you get the opportunity to see the likes of myself and Marcus and Jens giving you our views on trading in the world in general. So, as I said, we're going to talk about, right, what's the future for the euro, okay? And I see it as an interesting topic because A, a lot of my trading is in the FX markets, but also B, because I'm kind of I have spent many years living between the UK and Ireland, so I effectively have been basically kind of crossed the border between the UK sterling and the Irish euro and such. So of course I have a vested interest in it. So today we're going to talk about, why did it come into existence? As I said, not everybody is as old and wizened as me. Okay, all right. I appreciate some of the new people would not realise there was a life before the euro. We'll talk about such things as who have been the winners and the losers from the euro? And this is a question for yourselves, ladies and gentlemen. All right, and it's a question of who do you think have been the winners and who do you think have been the losers? It'd be great to hear what your thoughts are. Just zap them in that chat box there. That will be interesting to see what the kind of feedback is there. We'll talk a little bit about what have been the threats and and perhaps also what are the opportunities and what's the likely future trajectory of the euro. And once again, it'll be interesting to know that what your own views are, what your thoughts are. And we'll also, my assistant will have put up a little poll. Okay, the wonderful Anne will put up a little poll there to help us. And it'll be quite a simple poll. Okay, does the euro have a future? Yes or no? All right, so that'll be an interesting little poll for us to put up there. You can do that, and you can just see what people's thoughts are. Okay, I'm always fascinated. All right, as I said, it always helps to add to the kind of debate. Always helps to sort of give it'd be interesting to see what other people's thoughts are. For those who don't know me, my name's Paul. I've traded for many years. All right. Primarily, I like to sort of trade FX indices and commodities. Those are the major things that I would focus on in my own trading. So for longer term, position trades, swing trading, I tend to trade trends. I could be a trend trader, and then I tend to trade mean reversion and reversal for on an intraday basis. And there you go. My wonderful assistant Anna has just basically effectively stuck up the poll there. So which we'll see. So you have the polling. Does the euro have a future? Either A, absolutely, or B, a dim one. For those of you here in the room, just when that basically fires off, just be sure to hit that, because as I said, it's always fascinating to see what other people's views and thoughts might be on that particular topic. So here we go. Does the euro have a future, ladies and gentlemen? Well, as the slide states there, the euro is approximately 20 years old, all right, and I think it's probably fair to say that it's had a rather checkered life in those 20 years, but equally there have been many misadvised calls for its early demise, all right, and the question we've got to ask is, what's the reality about its future? Okay, well, where are we likely to end up to? And as I said, today what we'll do is we'll discuss what, if any, future the euro has and its likely trajectory. And as I said, there's the poll has come up there. My wonderful assistant has fired that off. Does the euro have a future? Absolutely, or a dim one. Okay, so it's a very small sample size at the moment. But if you're watching this, okay, if you join us, just give a ping, just stick in there and just have a little ping on there what you actually believe and think, and we'll sort of we'll give some insight into that later on during the actual session. So if we're going to talk about the euro, we should talk about, well, where shall we start? Okay, and this would be my view. All right, this would be my view. I have no doubt that there are, let's say, economic historians, all right, or geopolitical historians who might actually be able to go further and go into far greater detail. But remember, what today is, we're talking about traders, and we're talking about for people who are, probably quite new to trading, and we're just trying to get an overall understanding of, where the euro has come from, whether it has a future, and if it does, where it's going to go. And most importantly, as traders, how does that create opportunity for us? So my view would be that it started with the collapse of the Berlin Wall, okay, which triggered off the reunification of Germany. I remember it well. I was a teenage boy on the when we saw the collapse of the Berlin Wall and the reunification of Germany, and that sent the world effectively changed. The kind of geopolitical order that we had, and the Cold War was over, okay, and that effectively happened, and it was just quite seismic, all right, very seismic and stuff in the it's the in global positions, okay. But that kind of reunification of Germany, all right, meant that there was now a conversation, a debate to be had about the future of Europe, and Europe faced a choice between the free trade zone that the European community had become over the let's say the 60s and 70s and 80s. It became a free trade zone, or a future that had political and economic integration. And the people who saw that as the future of Europe, they're effectively they're driven towards towards a future of political and economic integration. And so I think it was 1989 that the Berlin Wall collapsed. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just pulling that out of the dim dark recesses of my brain, but I think it was about 1989 the collapse of the Berlin Wall occurred, and then 1991 the 12 members of what was the European community signed a thing called the Maastricht Treaty. And as part of that Maastricht Treaty, that included the creation of an economic and monetary union, EMU, and it set strict criteria for countries to convert to the euro. And we'll have a little look about that later, okay, those strict criteria and exactly how strictly they were applied. But that was, this is where we particularly started, okay. So, in the grand scheme of things, in the grand scheme of things, we're looking at really, 30 years ago that it kind of came into, the idea was put into paper, and it's really only kind of like 20 years that it's actually been in practice, which, if you're a young person, that might be your entire life. But in the history of Europe, history of the world, it's nothing. It's a mere sliver of time, okay, and that is something that we will discuss and talk about particularly later. But as I said, those strict criteria were laid down, okay, for what actually happened for countries to basically join the euro, for countries to embrace the euro. And these requirements included annual budget deficits not exceeding 3% of gross domestic product. Public debt should be under 60%. There needed to be exchange rate stability, and inflation rates had to be within 1.5% of the 3 lowest inflation rates within that community of the European Union, and your longer term inflation rates within 2%. Okay, so there were very strict criteria that were set. Strict criteria set by, let's say, by economists to ensure its success. And then invariably what then spend the next 20, 30 years is politicians fudging those strict criteria as and when it suited them, okay? Which, in many ways, it's, the what's that saying, that, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Clearly these intentions were exceptionally, the good, the strict criteria were, set with, with good intentions, but invariably politicians and, of all the nations in that Euro have fudged those numbers as and when it has been required for, let's say, political expediency, okay? And that in itself, sets you're kind of setting yourself up for a fall when that occurs, and we will touch upon that a little bit later as we come through. But those were the requirements that were set initially. So, when you talk about it, well, what actually is the euro? All right, and I appreciate we get people from all over the world watching this, whether they join us today or whether they're watching this on demand and later on YouTube channel from all over the world. And the euro it's the monetary unit and the currency of the European Union. All right, and it started out as being a non-cash monetary unit in 1999, and the currency notes and coins, which most of us here in this part of the world, they appeared in countries on the January the 1st, 2002. So as I said, in terms of the kind of coins and notes that people have in their hands, we're literally only coming up to like a kind of 20-year anniversary of that, which, if you're, as I said, if you're in your 20s, that, it's your whole life. But, if you're older, or if you're a student of economic history, it's nothing. 20 years is nothing. And it became the sole currency of those 12 states that, signed up to the euro, okay, that did that. There were members of that European community who didn't sign up to it. So like ourselves here in the UK, but also I think was it Denmark, Norway, Sweden, etc. Okay, who effectively decided to keep their own particular currency for reasons which might become apparent when we look at some of the challenges that the euro has had and has faced. So now, from those kind of 12, now there are, an additional members. So, Slovenia have joined, Malta and Greek Cyprus, they then joined, Slovakia, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, those kind of Baltic states, and also Andorra, Montenegro, Kosovo, and San Marino. They all now, they will utilize and use the euro. Excuse me, and that countries using the euro are effectively known as the Eurozone. So when you hear traders, analysts, central banks, politicians talk about the Eurozone, they are simply talking about the sort of geographical area of nations that use the euro as their single and sole currency unit. So, if you're looking at that, well, then you've got to talk about, well, who controls the euro? Okay. And I know some people will talk about, say, well, it's the people who control the euro. Yeah, nice try, but that's not the truth. The euro, okay, has been controlled since 1999. It's been managed by the ECB, the European Central Bank. The European Central Bank is located in Frankfurt. It is, the equivalent of Bank of England in the UK, the Federal Reserve in the US, which is the important piece, okay, Bank of Japan, okay, in Tokyo, all right. It's located in Frankfurt, and the ECB is an independent and neutral body headed by an appointed president. That's yes, you can come to your own conclusions about how independent and neutral it is. Okay, we're not here to make political statements, but that's what it says on the that's what it says on the document. And what happens is it's run by an appointed president. That president tends to serve an 8-year term. The present president is Christine Lagarde. Okay, and kind of the interesting thing to me is that pretty much all of the rest of the presidents of the European Central Bank have had a background in banking. They have been bankers. Okay, Christine Lagarde, her background is not in finance. Her background is law. All right, she's actually, she's a lawyer more so than a banker. And you have to sort of, what can you read into that? What can you take out of that? What is that? Is that a learning, okay, from the ECB, okay, in terms of actually the future trajectory of the euro, okay? Is it that a lawyer would be better suited to deal with the future challenges that the euro may have in its bank more so than a banker, okay? So that's just a little point for you to consider, to think about. And one of these things is that the European Central Bank and the euro, were effectively set up initially. One of the reasons was effectively to be seen to be as almost like a European version of the Federal Reserve and the US dollar, and almost like a counterweight. Okay, and in what had been a post-Cold War and post had gone to like a unipolar globe. Okay, in terms of the US being the only superpower, part of it was that they felt that the European Union, the euro, would act as a counterweight towards the US. My personal opinion is that has not occurred. Whilst we do have the infrastructure in place, in terms of global credibility and scale and compass, okay, the euro and the European Union does not in any way match the US Federal Reserve, the US dollar. But for what it was set up in terms of how it works within Europe, it provides lots of opportunity for some of the European nations. But what you will see is Christine Lagarde is the president of the ECB, and every month she will do set out and do a press conference talking about the state of the euro, state of European economies, and what she is likely to do in future to effectively keep the euro, but also European economies in a good place. So it might be seen or said that this was set up as as I said, a counterweight to the sort of Federal Reserve and to the US dollar, and that it provided ease of transactions, ease of to do industry across Europe, because you effectively removed foreign exchange risk from the areas and stuff. But you would think that everything has been hunky-dory, but you don't actually need it to be an FX trader to realize that over the last 10-20 years, okay, things have not been hunky-dory for the euro. Okay, sadly there's been many problems in the euro. Okay, many problems in the euro and the Eurozone, European Union, European economies. Okay, but so we're just going to look at the euro itself today. Okay, and the problems have been many. All right, so one of those problems is there's a list of problems is that the interest rates are interest rates not suitable for the whole of the Eurozone. And what does that actually mean? Is, well, that when you have like a common monetary policy, that involves a common interest rate for the whole Eurozone area. However, all right, the interest rates are, set by the ECB, and they may not be appropriate for all of the regions of the Eurozone. Okay, so for example, back in the sort of the early noughties, the interest rate was set very low because effectively it basically helped stimulate the German economy. It's Germany is an exporting economy, and invariably those low interest rates were allowed the sort of German economy to find its feet after reunification and start to real build momentum. The challenge was, and you can see this from personal experience, was that in places out at the periphery, like Ireland, for example. Okay, Ireland's economy was the Celtic tiger economy was starting to overheat. House prices were going astronomically high, but because the interest rates were no longer dictated from the Bank of Ireland in Dublin, they were invariably they were being set by the ECB. Okay, and so they were set to basically to support Germany, but what that meant was that peripheral nations like Ireland, who lost the ability to set their interest rates, their economy just went into just red hot economy. Okay, and effectively what that meant is that there was just huge inflation. Okay, in house prices and asset prices, which if you were an asset owner was wonderful for you, but for lots of other people was a real problem. And invariably what happened is that when the crash happened in 2007 2008, that crash was felt even worse in some of those peripheral nations. Okay, because their economies had so overinflated. And that problem, for example, for Ireland, was also seen in places like Spain, Portugal, Italy, etc. Those peripheral nations, okay, had that. So the kind of interest rate, as I said, is not entirely suitable for the whole Eurozone. You also have a challenge where the euro, it's not an optimal currency area. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's say if you're working in California, okay, if you were working in California and you lost your job and you moved to New York for a new job, the complete opposite side of the continental United States, you'd be able to do that, and invariably you'd still be using the same currency, but you'd still be in the same country and you'd still be using the same language. That is not the case. Okay, that's not necessarily the case with euro. Now, as much as English has started to become the de facto language of diplomacy and business across Europe, that's still not overall ideal. Okay, and so whilst the euro has the European Union is set up on in terms of effectively the free movement of capital and labour, it is not as frictionless as it would be in the let's say, for example, the United States. What it also does is it can limit its fiscal policy. Okay, in terms of the euro, can limit fiscal policy because with a common monetary policy, it's important to have similar levels of national debt. Otherwise, what you might find is countries would struggle to attract enough buyers for their national debt. Okay, this has been a problem over the last 10 years or so. Not as much as it has been a few years ago, but at some point it has been very. It's caused real problems, real difficulties. Okay, where we've seen, especially some of those peripheral nations, Ireland and other, some of the Mediterranean countries, Portugal, okay, Spain, Italy, Greece, etc. They have had, real problems at times, okay, when in fact, they've basically, they've had, large debts, but also rising bond yields, okay, because invariably, they've had to do that to attract enough buyers for their particular debt. So, when you have that, what happens is that basically limits fiscal policy. You also can have a lack of incentives. What can that mean for nations in the Eurozone? Well, many nations will be a member of the euro because it protects that country from a currency crisis. All right, which in many ways is a good thing. However, the flip side of that is, if you are protected from a currency crisis, well, then there is less incentive for countries to implement deep structural reform and fiscal responsibility. if you give a politician, an opportunity to either A, take an easy way out, or B, do nothing, okay, they will try and do both. All right, that's just the way politicians will be. And if that country's felt that it is basically in a safe harbor away from a currency crisis, it is less likely to take the tough choices that are required for structural reform and fiscal responsibility. And there have been particular instances of that, okay, throughout this 20 years of the history of the euro and the European Union. You also have no scope for devaluation, okay, which is an effective tool in times of a particular crisis, okay. So since the start, okay, several countries have during this period, they've experienced things like rising labour costs. What this does is that makes exports more uncompetitive, and so when that happens, well, then currencies will try to devalue themselves, okay, to restore competitiveness. And whether that be a right or wrong thing, it is a thing that happens, okay, and that nations have done. Whereas nations with using the euro, they lack the opportunity to do that, okay. And certainly 10 odd so years ago, okay, when Greece, Spain, Italy were in real very dire straits, the opportunity to be able to devalue is what would have actually helped them, okay, would have actually maybe given them some opportunity to basically return to a sense of normality far sooner than they actually did. What you'll also get is that leads into things like divergence in bank rates. Okay, so in theory, you have a common interest rate. However, that can be, a common interest rate, as we sort of said, it doesn't always particularly help. All right, particular nations, the ability, if they're struggling, they need the ability to effectively set their own interest rates to manage their own economies, and that has problems in terms of things like actual credit policy and such, and how that is set for those particular nations. And then also there can be asymmetric shocks, and what would that mean as well? If one particular country experiences like an external shock, okay, well then it might need a different response, but this isn't generally possible with the euro and the Eurozone, right? Because effectively, all of those rates, okay, all of that policy is set from the ECB in Frankfurt, okay, and so their ability to deal with asymmetric shocks is limited, okay, is limited and stuff. So it is far from hunky dory. Okay, it is far from hunky dory. As I said earlier, the euro was probably set up with good intentions, but invariably because of the way it was set up and the way it was seen as a kind of grand political project, it's a case of there were kind of, let's say, gaping holes in terms of how and how it would actually work and come together, and that has caused problems. And I think I said earlier on, in terms of us acting as a counterweight to the US, there are limits on that simply because of the kind of the way it is structured. It does not give it the credibility that, say, the US dollar or even the yen or the sterling, etc., would have, and that is a concern. Okay, that is a concern for us. So just the thing, Vincenzo says, I think the euro will have a future, only if they won't be pushing for a political union, and ever so, cryptocurrencies will mean it won't be a monopoly. Yeah, it's interesting. You're talking about there, the kind of political integration and the economic integration, needed all to occur at the same time, and it didn't. And 20 years later, we are still dealing with the sort of the challenges and the problems from that. Okay, and also, absolutely right. Cryptocurrencies and in itself digital. Let's call them digital sovereign currencies, for want of a better word. Okay, they will invariably have an impact. Okay, and that's probably a little bit beyond the remit of this, but they are definitely a factor. It's a factor to take on board. So thank you for that, Vincenzo. Great commentary there. So, who have been the winners and losers? And you're going to have to excuse me. I mean, it's the Euro 2020 is on as with so I figured I'd use some kind of a football theme to it. All right, okay, to keep it a bit different. Okay, in terms of what you can look at in terms of the visuals. So, who would be the winners and losers? Well, once again, this is my view. You might have a different view, and if you do, please, I will gladly hear that. Stick it in the chat box. I'd be very interested and fascinated to hear. So, in terms of the winners, well, I think the biggest winner has been Germany. Okay, and Germany's been the biggest winner out of the euro. You know, the excuse me, the ECB, and, you know, effectively as Germany, as is Europe's biggest economy, and has increased its level of being the, let's say, the kind of the engine of Europe, engine of continental Europe. Invariably, the ECB has become, you know, has always acted in the best interests of Germany, because that is the economic engine of Europe. It might also be said that you know, it has helped France, okay, but I would say to a lesser extent, okay. I think, you know, maybe 20 years ago, people were thinking, who would be of those two dominant nations, Germany and France, which one would be the, you know, become the dominant nation, and people thought it might be France, but I think it's pretty clear to everybody that, you know, Germany's become the dominant nation in Europe, and France, you know, as much as it likes to portray itself as the major player, it is the sort of it is the ginger stepchild to the main German sort of heir to Europe. Okay. Also, what you might say is, you know, the Netherlands. Okay, the Netherlands has benefited from it in many respects. Okay, you know, what we saw, especially 10 years ago, was that some of those kind of, let's say, the kind of Northern European nations. Okay, so it was like the sort of the Dutch and the Germans, etc. You know, they exercised, you know, really good fiscal responsibility, and that allowed them to weather some of the storms that we've seen. Poland has done well out of it as well, in the sense that, you know, but it's probably a big thing, because actually, you know, Poland has transitioned across, you know, has basically found itself a huge benefactor, okay, from European Union subsidies. Okay, I think it's at the moment still probably the nation that gets the most in terms of subsidies. So that has done well for that. On the flip side, you know, in terms of who have been the losers, well, I'd say probably personally, my view would be Italy was one of the greatest. Has been one of the greatest losers of that. We start at the end of the 80s, okay, into the early 90s. Northern Italy, in particular, especially their engineering companies, you know, were world class. Okay, absolutely world class. You know, the view of them that was actually, you know, a real powerful engine, and you know, the Germans and the French were wary of that. Were wary of that kind of Italian sort of, you know, as I said, the Italian northern engineering, you know, their ability to effectively sort of impact upon, you know, French and German economies, you know, but and the euro was a fantastic way, okay, Europeans' fantastic way of effectively taking the fangs out of the you know, the Italian economy, even though it still remains the third largest economy in continental Europe. It has, you know, such difficulties in terms of its internal domestic issues with finances that invariably the euro hasn't particularly helped, you know, in terms of its economy. And then we've also seen those peripheral nations like Portugal, Ireland, Greece, and Spain. As I said, you know, the euro has created wealth for, you know, many people in those nations, but also has crippled those nations, you know, for the reasons that we looked at in the kind of slide before. You know, the variably, you know, as they've lost the ability to raise, and, you know, their interest rates, okay, the ability to effectively to give them room for maneuver based upon the shocks that occur to their economy, as any nation particularly will have. So there have definitely been some winners and losers, and I think that kind of will exacerbate in the years to come, personally. And what we will see is that, you know, we will see almost like a two-speed euro, okay, and that we'll touch upon in a moment. So, you know, your question becomes to the main one: you know, does the euro have a future? All right, what is that future of the euro? But many people forget, okay, you know, because we're traders, we just trade the euro, okay. You just trade the euro against the US dollar, you trade the euro against the sterling or the yen, etc. You know, we're just traders of it. But what you forget is that, you know, at its heart, the euro was that an expression of a political ideal, all right. And the initial ideal, you know, was actually quite simple: that nations that trade and share their institutions are less likely to go to war with each other. Remember, a lot of these people who worked in that European community, France, Germany, Italy, say in the UK, you know, they had come through the Second World War, and, you know, seen the terrible devastation that had occurred, and were invariably kind of, you know, did not want that to happen again, and felt that nations that trade and share their institutions, they're less likely to go to war with each other. And it, you know, it was right in the sense that cooperation rather than confrontation was the order of the day. So, as I said, you know, that path to hell is paved with good intentions, okay, you know, and so the idea was simple, and it was an expression of a political ideal, you know, and the ideal behind that was invariably to to stop more wars in Europe. And some people would claim that the euro has been part of ensuring a relative level of peace in Europe for the last 75 years or so. Okay, I might say that actually probably NATO has had a bigger impact on less on removing the effect of war in Europe, but it's fair to say that European community and the euro have had an impact in that. And so that kind of links into it is and this is my personal view, right? Is that despite its many problems, my belief is that the likelihood is that the euro will survive. I think I'm not going to make a huge claim, but I think definitely for the next 10 years, okay, for now until let's say 2030, the euro has a future, which means we can trade it. All right. And why will it survive is because, well, it suits the German export economy far better than the Deutschmark ever did. Okay, it makes German exports much more competitive than the Deutschmark ever did. So for that reason alone, okay, there is always going to be enthusiasm, okay, enthusiasm for the euro in German and export economies like that within Europe. It also it allows for easier control of European nations by the European Union, and they want to keep European nations sort of in line. They want to avoid any opportunity for another Brexit to occur, even though Brexit, they still have always used sterling GBP. We're a member of Europe, but we're part of the European Union. And I think the countries that are within that euro, I think it will be enormously difficult for them to leave the Eurozone. So it will survive as a means of control. Okay, I think for those control of those particular nations, and it's also a case of it has enough momentum behind it to maintain its present place in the kind of, let's say, the world order. Okay, in terms of of the FX foreign exchange markets. That's not to say it couldn't all collapse overnight. Okay, what you tend to find if you watch the end of the Cold War, okay, things happen very, very, very slowly, and then they happen very, very fast. But certainly for the next 10 years, so say, okay, the euro has a future. The euro will be around, okay, and I personally believe that the euro will always be around, probably beyond that, because it suits the Germans, it suits the German economy so much better than the Deutschmark did, and I think that's what will be one of the main drivers for it in the future. So that's all well and good, but how does that actually help us as traders? All right, that's how does that work? Well, remember the EU thought that the ECB, okay, European Central Bank of Europe, would act like a European Federal Reserve, and their political desire to make the euro a success means that politicians will put basically their own vanity before prudence. Okay, that we have seen that repeatedly. Okay, either they make decisions that are very poor, fudged compromises, okay, that basically defy the strict criteria that was initially set up for the creation of the euro, or invariably they will make no decision and they kick the can down the road. And we saw that, we've seen that time and time again. But there is a political desire to make that euro a success, and that political desire, okay, that goes towards creating volatility, and that is what traders love. Many years ago, one of my own mentors said that when there is a battle between politics and economics, the politicians win, and then economics wreaks its revenge. It's actually what we have seen in terms of like the European Europe. That has actually been the case. Okay, politicians have made decisions based upon their own vanity, and then the economics of it have come back to wreak their revenge. Okay, a few years down the line, and as I said, that's what causes volatility, and that's what we traders love. And within that, okay, what we see here, from Mario Draghi was the ECB president before Christine Lagarde, back in 2012, all right, came out with this particular comment, and we'll see. I'm going to show you a chart, okay. As he said there, within our mandate, the ECB is ready to do whatever it takes to preserve the euro, and believe me, it will be enough. All right, and that's there is political will, okay, there is political will to create euro, because huge political legacies have been built upon the euro, so they will do whatever it takes to preserve the euro. Okay, and that is what we will see. That is what we will see, is that decisions will be made that will effectively be to basically backstop the euro regardless. And here's a little bit of an example of it here. I remember trading this a good few years back now and stuff. This was this would have been back in 2014, and gosh, it was great. It was great trading this, absolutely lovely. So at one of the ECB press conferences, Lagarde, not Lagarde, but Draghi came out. This was 2014, I think it was May 2014, and sort of talked about how they would do whatever it takes, and if that meant they had to become the buyer of last resort, which was something that they were not meant to be, then that's what would happen. And invariably what we saw was that, here we go, let's get the old drawing tool up here, okay. Literally that afternoon, okay, they talked about price had just popped up and had just tickled the soft underbelly of the 140 level. And then over there, what was over about the next sort of 10, 11 months, we saw price drop down all the way down to almost like 104. And in price, euro lost just against the US dollar. Okay, it lost like 3,500 points over that period. Okay, and across a whole host of barrage of other currencies. Okay, really. They were saving the euros. It says, yes, we will do whatever it takes. Okay, and that if that's what they meant to do, if that's what happens, that's what we'll do. And it's when events like that occur that we start to see that kind of volatility happens. And let's face it, that's what traders love. So my own view is that because of that political will, all right, they will do whatever it takes. That means it will create opportunities. Okay, and certainly for the next 10 years or so, that will provide trading opportunities in the euro. So, in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, the euro is an experiment to create the largest currency area in the world. Okay, came out of the end of the Cold War and the collapse of the Berlin Wall. Started with the Maastricht Treaty in 1991. Created as a unit in 1999. Notes and coins which we use today came in from like 2002. It's controlled by the European Central Bank in Frankfurt, which is headed by Christine Lagarde. It's had many issues, okay, due to embracing monetary union before political union. And though despite its problems, I think it will undoubtedly survive, certainly for the next 10 years, as it suits the German economy. And that is the engine of Europe, okay? And what Germany wants, Germany gets, and that's the way it is, ladies and gentlemen. So with that in mind, ladies, don't forget to join us next time, okay? So same time on Friday, come and join my colleagues Jens to understanding the order book and trading, including an introduction to the order book, the players in the market, what conclusions can we draw from the order book from a psychological perspective. So that will be Friday, 2:00 London time, 25th of June. Check your inbox for the webinar link, or head over to the Admiral's website to register for the live webinars. As always, I hope you found that useful. If you've got other questions that you want to ask us, if you want to contact us, or if you've had ideas for future ones, you can do so, okay, at contact global@admiralmarkets.com, youtube.com /admiralsglobal, facebook.com /admiralsglobal, and instagram.com /admiralsglobal. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. As unfortunately we've just run out a little bit of time there, but thank you for joining us. I hope you found that useful. That's given you a little bit of insight, a little bit of colour, and maybe some food for thought about some of the challenges that we face with the euro, especially if you use the euro every day. You probably don't really necessarily think about the kind of, let's say, the bigger challenges and obstacles that are facing it, because, well, to be fair, you don't care. You just want to know you can use your euro to buy your coffee, okay, go to the cinema or go out for drinks with friends when you can, and we're in a post-COVID world. But hopefully that's just giving you a little bit of insight. As I said, I think it's still going to be around for 10 years at least, okay, for the reasons we talked about. There will be volatility. That volatility will provide opportunity, okay, and that opportunity is what traders are looking for. So if you found this particularly useful, okay, be sure to give us a thumbs up, or if not, even a thumbs down if it hasn't helped you. That's fair enough. It's all good feedback for us. be sure to sort of make sure that you subscribe to the Admirals channel on YouTube. And if you've got thoughts or comments, please put them in there. Okay, or if you've got considerations for future sessions, do so. We'd love to hear them. And as always, it's just for me to sort of say that I wish you the very best of success in your own trading endeavors, and I look forward to speaking to you